The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to Afterlife Radio. I'm Kalila Smith, coming to you live from New Orleans, the mystical land of voodoo where the spirits dwell. And we are going to be exploring some very interesting facets today of mediumships and the paranormal. Please join me with my co-host, Billy Roberts, coming to you live from Cornwall in the UK. Hi, Billy. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Kalila. Nice to speak to you again.
Wonderful to speak to you as always. So, Billy, there's a lot of confusion. We did a show, we talked about the different types of hauntings and so forth. And I think the biggest thing that people get confused about, and I still see people writing in and asking questions about poltergeist activity. They think because there's physical activity going on in a location or in a home where people live, they assume that it's being caused by an angry ghost, and they're calling it poltergeist activity when, in my opinion, it's telekinesis. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you are right. I mean, the dictionary definition of a poltergeist is a noisy or mischievous ghost. But not all poltergeist activity is the result of spirit intervention. It could be just an accumulation of energy that's been dormant in the property for some time. Telekinetic energy is something completely different. It's when objects can move by themselves, pictures can fall off the wall, clocks can even stop. And I've had experience when I've been filming where a glass of water has flown off the mantelpiece onto the floor. And it was caught on camera. It's on one of my videos. So all kinds of things can occur. And they're not necessarily to do with spirits. Sometimes people involved in these activities, people involved in paranormal activities, they can create energy. If you get sympathetic minds, people who are in harmony with each other, they can create this magnificent energy that can precipitate all kinds of phenomena. And the whole thing's, fascinating.
It is indeed, yes. So there is a difference, though. If something is considered to be telekinesis, is that strictly energy coming from the individual, or can that be energy that's in the atmosphere in the home? Because I know you've talked before about the imprints that are left in buildings and bricks and so forth.
I mean, it's just my opinion and from my experience. But telekinetic energy is usually, it can be energy that's built up in the home. It can be, just as you said, energy that's created between a group. I think we've all done the table tipping thing where you lay your hands on a table without touching it, and bouncing the energy up and down can cause the table to move. So, the human form is an electromagnetic unit of incredible power. And, we're capable of doing all kinds of things. The air, as we've established before, the air or surrounding air is filled with electromagnetic energy, just like a video and audio tape is coated with this electromagnetic substance to catch sound and images. So the air is the same. And human beings, we can infiltrate it, we can activate it, we can access it. And this is a part of our development when we develop certain paranormal skills, whether it's mediumistic skills or healing. We do have the ability to access this invisible force that's quite prevalent everywhere that we go. And, in old buildings even, as well as new ones. And I've seen some strange things. Usually, you get certain children, puberty, they unconsciously unleash certain things, certain energies, and cause or precipitate all kinds of things to occur. I think I might have spoken about a clone ball. A clone ball is a focus of energy that's mostly found in places of enjoyment, theaters, cinemas, and anywhere there's been a lot of fun and human activity. And this energy lies dormant for so long, and it eventually becomes very active, and it can mimic what a lot of people think is a poltergeist activity. It's telekinetic. It manifests or transmutes into many different forms. It's nothing to do with discarnate souls, but it is something to do with human beings and the way the mind has released certain energies, albeit happiness and enjoyment. So we are capable of doing incredible things with our minds. And, sometimes you don't need to develop anything. Just show an interest in paranormal subjects and become involved in a group, such as the group you are involved in, you lead. And that can develop abilities that you never thought you could develop. We have potential has never been reached, knowingly. And there are exercises that we can use to release these energies.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I think that's important for people to realize, because everyone, well, not everyone, but, a lot of people want to immediately label something a ghost and caused by someone who has passed on. And it's not necessarily the case. In fact, more often than not, it's either the energy that's left there, what we call the residual energy, or something from somebody who's actually there. So it's, I think it's really important that people understand that they have to be their own critics. They have to be their own skeptics. And they have to really look kind of further than the surface before they really label something. They have to really kind of figure out where it is, where is it coming from? What is this? What's causing it? And really kind of look at it from a scientific perspective in order to really get a better capability of understanding what's happening there, rather than just label it immediately that there's a ghost that's unhappy. Don't you agree?
I totally agree. And I think you'll agree with me, there's a lot of people involved in paranormal groups who are quite gullible, impressionable. They'll accept any commonplace activity and put it down to spirit activity. And I learned a long time ago to be very analytical, very skeptical, until something occurs that, I don't have an explanation for. Because we live in a very multidimensional universe, and there are different things occurring all around us. The spirit world is not a place. It's a condition, a transcendental state. And the spirit world interpenetrates the physical world. It orbits within and around the physical atom. So spirit people are often unaware of our presence, as we are unaware of theirs. They walk through us and around us. And a medium is merely somebody whose faculty develops to such a degree where they can become conscious, aware of these entities who may not be aware of them, unless there's a two-way operation, a two-way process where a spirit is aware of you and acknowledges the fact that you have an ability to talk to them. Don't forget, they get really excited when they finally meet somebody, an incarnate person who they can talk to and pass on information to. It's an excitement for them. It's a huge adventure, as it is, and it should be for a developing medium. Because people say, well, I've developed my mediumship now, and I wanted to move forward. But what you've got to understand is the development, as we've said before, goes on and on. You're never finished. Your development is endless. You're always learning something, and your mediumship changes. I mean, mine certainly changed over the years. And although I've become very skeptical, I think my skepticism has developed for a particular reason. And I rather write about it today than actually demonstrate it. Because once you've had evidence of survival, once you've had evidence from a medium, or a medium is fulfilled and knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is another life, then there's no need really to see other mediums or to go on. I don't think so, even though it is an exciting venture. Don't you think?
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about, the Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spookhouse. This is real.
I agree. Now, in my experience, however, in training to really fine-tune my mediumship, I saw a lot of different mediums. And I think if someone is a medium in training, that they need to see different mediums and experience different points of view and different ways that they're tapping into it, and just kind of watch them work. But no, once you've gotten an answer, and the thing is, if you're a sitter, and that's what we call people who are getting messages from the medium, is a sitter.
Yeah. Right.
If you're going as a sitter and hoping to get a message, once you hear from that one particular loved one, that person may not come through again the next time.
Exactly.
Someone else might come through. Or you may be, especially if you're going to a gallery, or what they call in the UK, the platform, you may not get a message at all because you've already gotten what you need to hear. So there's a lot of different conditions that are there. And of course, the more you go to mediums, I think it's always good if you go to another one and get validation. It never hurts to get validation from someone else. But, once you hear what you're going to hear, your loved one isn't going to keep coming back to reassure you of what they've already told you.
Exactly. I mean, some people, I've met lots of people who become obsessed with mediums. They're so obsessed that they make it a life's mission. Consulting one medium after another, and that can be very unhealthy, and it can also be very psychologically disturbing to some people. I think you have to be very selective in the mediums that you consult. And people say, well, can you recommend a medium in London or one in Manchester to me? And I said, well, I don't like to recommend mediums that I don't really know. It's best to go to somebody who's seen a particular person. And the other thing is, because a medium is famous on television or well-known, doesn't mean to say they're any better than the ordinary medium who does the local spiritualist church. You have to have rapport, be in harmony with a medium. And although people go to a medium because they might want to hear from their mother or daughter or sister, member of the family, you've got to understand that that person doesn't always want to communicate, or is not always able to communicate for many different reasons. Mediumship is experimental. It doesn't always work. And I wouldn't like to think that my mother or father or brother was just floating around waiting for me to call upon them. Because if you accept the fact that life continues, then also the process of learning continues, and our loved ones carry on learning. There are halls of learning where they attend lectures of a kind. They follow a certain route to develop spiritually, to develop the skills that they didn't develop in this life. And if a person is a devout Christian, for an example, and they believe in Jesus Christ or the Virgin Mary, then they are always, I think, given the opportunity to encounter those entities. There's a fantastic book, one of the first spiritualist books that I read. It was called Life in the World Unseen, and it was by a man called Anthony Borgia. He was a medium, and he actually received some communication from I can't remember his name, but his name was Hugh Benson. He was actually the Archbishop of Canterbury's son. And when he was alive, this man, he'd actually written a book denouncing spiritualism and people who were involved in spiritual activities, such as communicating with the so-called dead. But when he passed over, he realized how wrong he was because he was still alive, and he couldn't progress to the states of consciousness that he wanted to aspire to. And before he could do that, he had to take back what he'd written when he was alive. So he found a medium, and this medium, Anthony Borgia, was able to take down through, he was an automatist, which meant he could write in the hand of the deceased person. And he rewrote the person's life in the spirit world, all that happened from the day he died, and how he progressed in the spirit world. It's a fantastic book, and I recommend that everybody reads it if they want to know what it's like after the process of death occurs.
What is that book called again?
It's called Life in the World Unseen, and it's by Anthony Borgia, Borgia.
Interesting.
I mean, it's a very spiritualistic book. You know, you might think people who are skeptical might read it and say, well, it's a bit flowery, a bit sugary. But it explains perfectly well the different spheres. He goes into these different spheres, and he sees a man. He's led by a guide into this very dark environment. And there's a sort of a palatial residence that's in darkness. And he's taken, Richard Hugh Benson is taken into this house by his guide. And he sees a man in a silk dressing gown, elderly man, sitting by a very ornate fireplace with no fire in it, almost shivering with cold. And it's dark and dismal. And it was explained to him, explained to Richard Hugh Benson, that this man was a very wealthy individual. And because he didn't believe in anything to do with the afterlife, when he was dying, he thought he would hedge his bets. So what he did, he bought stained glass windows for the local church, just in case he was going to...
Oh, wow.
So that's what happened to him. Of course, the motive was wrong. And if the motive is wrong, the results don't last and they don't have an effect. So that's one example that's in the book. It's very, it's poetic in some ways, but for people who want to know what it's like, some people have no idea what to expect. And, you know, it doesn't, I might have one idea and you might have another, but people, particularly people with no foresight, people who really don't have any knowledge of this kind of thing, they think, well, it could all be made up. And, you know, the one single thing we all have in common is death. It's a very lonely road. We're all going to die, and we die at different times, and we don't know when it's going to come. And we don't know what's going to be there when we pass over. But I think that if you equip yourself before you go with the right data, the right information, fill your mind with the information that you would like to be or like to encounter when you go, I think you're in the right place.
I
My
agree. I definitely agree on that. Yes. And what's interesting, and here's where coming in, getting other opinions on this. You're talking about this gentleman's book and his experience, and basically how this all happened to him after his death. And I didn't read the book, but I'm very familiar with. I've done a lot of work with spiritualism in Brazil. One of the mediums who is in my physical circle is from Brazil, and I had the fortune of being able to go there and study with her. There's been a lot of cases down there where people have channeled books and written books from spirits on the other side. Another book that I read was called Violets on the Window. And it was a young girl who spoke through her, authored her book through her aunt who was still living. And all of these things that you look at, and it's very, very similar situations. It's just like a near-death experience. If you start looking at, different people's experiences with particular aspects of the afterlife, near-death experiences, or situations like this where spirits have actually written books from the other side, start seeing similarities. And to me, that's validation. Don't you think?
I do. I really do. And I'm always reminded about the Buddhist word maya. They refer to this state, the physical world, as maya, the dream state. So this is the dream. And when they believe that when you pass over into this dimension, different dimension, that is the real life that you're going to live in. And even in Buddhism, they say, you fill your mind with as much spiritual information as you can, because your mind is the common denominator. It creates the environment that you're going to live in. And I mentioned very briefly about people who believe in Jesus or the Virgin Mary. If you fill your mind with the religion that you follow, then that's the environment that you'll go into. Not necessarily the right environment, but it's good for you. So whatever you think, you will meet or you'll get in the end. If you're a perpetrator of a heinous crime, then you've already mapped out, you've already created the environment that you're going to go to. And this environment is the hell, because heaven and hell are pagan words. They didn't exist once upon a time. But if you look in any Eastern tradition, you'll find there is an explanation for the after-death experiences, like we've said before, Kamaloka and the Devachanic planes, because there is no physical body. Physical body has gone. It's buried and decays, or it's been cremated and resolved backwards into its original elements. But when you pass over, you are equipped with this information, this kernel of information that's the foundation upon which you build your future life. And in reality, God does not exist, not the God in the traditional sense. There is only the evolution, and your conscience is the God that you answer to, because we all have a conscience of some kind, even the perpetrators of crimes. And although you can hide it in this physical life, you can't in the next life. You have to face it, and that becomes your judge and your jury. Just my belief. It's my opinion.
Yeah. Sounds reasonable. Definitely reasonable. Well, let's take a little break here, Billy. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about some of the processes of mediumship and how it works and how to know if it's working or not working. A lot of people, and even if you're not a medium, if you're a sitter, it's very useful to understand how mediumship works with someone, because it's usually quite different than what you might imagine. We'll be right back. Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after-death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith. Okay, we are back. So, Billy, let's talk a little bit about the process of mediumship.
I think because we're all different, the way we work, mediumship, the process of it is different with each individual. Depends whether you have a propensity towards clairaudience, which is the ability to hear supersensual sounds, or whether you regard yourself as clairvoyant or clairsentient. Now, I said on a very earlier show that clairsentience is something the majority of people have. And for some reason, mediums who are clairsentient, have to embellish things by saying, well, I'm clairvoyant or I'm clairaudient, because they believe that clairsentience is not a very valid part of mediumship. And it is, because with clairsentience, that's the ability to sense a spirit presence. You can have the ability to describe the individual, the color of eyes, the hair, the height of the person, how they died, even the sound of their voice can come to you. So a lot of detail is given through clairsentience. And this is probably one of the first skills that develop with mediumship. Now, when a spirit communicator communicates with you, providing that you're not given to flights of fancy, or you don't have a psychological problem, sometimes they will communicate through a third party. Because if an individual, say an uncle or somebody you were very fond of, had no knowledge of mediumship or spiritualism or after-death experiences, no interest of that nature, when they pass over, they still have no interest. They just realize they're still alive. So their ability to communicate is sometimes very ambiguous. So what they do, they have to go to a third party, which could be the medium's spirit guide, their gatekeeper or doorkeeper, or it might be somebody who's looking after them themselves. And, the information is passed from the deceased individual to the third party, who will use their ability to give it to the medium. And sometimes the information that's given changes slightly. So the onus is on the medium to decipher sometimes this ambiguous information that comes into them. And clairaudience, people wrongly assume that clairaudience is just a voice. You have to hear a voice inside your head or at the side of you. It's not always a voice. Clairaudience often comes with extraneous thoughts. These are like a stream of thoughts that are not your own thoughts. They stream into your mind in no particular order, and they give you things like a name of a person, a random name, or a random address of somebody, sufficient to enable you, the medium, to establish a connection with the person that you're speaking to. If you're working in an auditorium with a theater audience or a church audience, you have to know who you're going to. And sometimes it's difficult to go directly to an individual. It's very, very difficult. You can chance it if you think that you're with a certain person. But more often than not, you have to work around the information that you're given and see how it's accepted. Clairvoyance, as we all know, it's the ability to see. And sometimes, it's not all mediums are clairvoyants, and not all clairvoyants are mediums. That's something else people misunderstand. So if you go to see, if you want communication from a deceased relative, you don't consult a tarot reader or a crystal gazer or a palmist. You go and see a medium. Now, clairvoyance sometimes can manifest just as images in your mind. And I said earlier on that to develop the ability of clairvoyance, you have to have a good imagination. I don't mean to make it up, but I'm talking about the ability to visualize and imagine things And if you're giving a message to somebody in an audience from a deceased relative, it's important with clairvoyance that you can see in your mind what you're saying to the person, and that's transmitted to the recipient of the message. Because if you can't see it, if it's not transmitted properly, then the person to whom the message is given will not have confidence in what you're saying. So the process of medium, I mean, I've seen you work and you've seen me work, and we complement each other, but we work in different ways. So no two mediums work in the same way. We all have our own styles and our own ways of working. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And something to be noted is that when you do have clairvoyance, and it took me a while to become clairvoyant. I was, clairsentience forever, and then suddenly, and clairaudient as well. And then suddenly one day I woke up and I could see things, and I was clairvoyant. And for the longest time on paranormal investigations, I used to bring a second medium along with me who was clairvoyant to basically act as an interpreter, because I was writing books about it. And at the time, it was kind of like I would suddenly start feeling something or sensing something that was not recognizable to me.
Yeah.
And I would have to get an interpretation from the other medium and tell me, okay, what is it? What do you see? And to kind of get some clarification on it. And then one day I woke up and I was clairvoyant. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, people see things differently. Even if you're clairvoyant, not all clairvoyants see the same thing.
Exactly.
I have one friend who's a medium, and it's incomprehensible to me, but he tells me he sees bends of light. And that's what he sees. He sees bends of light. He sees energy. And I see panoramic views. I mean, everything's in full color. When I dream in full color. So I see things like a movie in my mind's eye, is how I see things. And then there's others who see only in black and white. So you can put several clairvoyants together and they may all see things differently. And in the very beginning, I would see something and it might be something very symbolic, but very, very quickly I got to where I saw things literally. If I saw a red rose, it was a red rose. It wasn't, what did that red rose mean to me? And a lot of mediums will see things in symbols. They will show you something that's familiar to you to remind you of something else.
Exactly.
And I consider myself very fortunate that somehow if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, for me it is a duck. It's not just something that reminds me of a duck. So it's very interesting how it all works, and everybody's different. But I think the most important thing to always remember is that if you are a budding medium, you want to keep your mind open. If you put limits on it, spirit is limitless. And if you put limitations, or if you say, I only want to be able to do this, that's as far as they're going to take you.
Absolutely.
You have to be open-minded and expect nothing. If you expect nothing and just open yourself up to what spirit has to show you, you might get a lot of surprises.
Exactly. And I've found in my experience, interviewing people over the years, an emotional trauma can actually precipitate a mediumistic skill. I've seen it in people who've had no interest whatsoever in mediums and that kind of thing, but because they've lost somebody close to them, a relative or a husband or friend, something has occurred in their brain. And although people have thought they've had a nervous breakdown, it hasn't been that. It's just been an awakening of some part of the spirit, and they were able to see spiritual community, spiritual activity. I might have said this to you once, but a lady came to see me many years ago. Very shy lady. She was in her mid-50s, very pasty face and thin. And she didn't want a reading, but she wanted to ask me questions. And anyway, cut a long story short, she started to see and hear things. And I said, well, that's not unusual. She said, it is for me. I was a nun. And I said, wow. She said, and what happened to me? She was walking down the road. This is in the day in the UK when they wore the long flowing gowns. And there were some builders doing work on a house, and they were up the ladder with bricks and stuff. And a brick had fallen down, and all that she heard, a voice shouting to get out of the way, but the brick smacked her on the head, and she woke up in hospital.
Oh my.
But she was in a coma or unconscious for a few days. And then when she came to, she was seeing people dressed in Victorian clothes walking around her bed, and she thought she died. And that's how it started for her. Now, that woman,
Wow.
She eventually became a working medium and then moved to Canada to be with her family. But it shows you that something is meant to happen. If you don't take notice, I'm not saying you're going to have an accident, but something always occurs to awaken you in some way. Now, it's just an observation, and I've got to know you very well. And I bet you any money your mediumship has come on leaps and bounds since Stephanie, your daughter, passed away.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That opened prior to her passing away. I mean, you recall when you and I worked together. I mean, back then, and a lot of what I picked up on those investigations, I was picking up a lot of, the residual stuff, the energetic things that were there on those locations. But, I really thought that I was communicating with the other side. I really did. And it wasn't until she passed away that I realized that I couldn't reach her. I saw her the next morning on the edge of the bed, and then she disappeared when I screamed. And I couldn't reach her. And, later, it was Sid Patrick who explained to me that I was just so deep in my grief that I was preventing myself from communicating with her. But I even called one of my friends that I did hundreds of investigations with. I called Philip, and I said, have we made this up for the last 20 years? Did we make this up? And he said, no, we didn't. And I said, I think I'm going crazy. And that's when I really started going down the path of really fine-tuning and developing my mediumship, because I realized that I had only scratched the surface, and I was really only contacting what was earthbound. I was just in that next level, and that's when I really started studying and traveling and just really working with different mentors and developing it. But it's a development. It really is. It takes a while. You may have, people, I've heard people call themselves born mediums. And there are people who are born who have more of an aptitude for it, without a doubt. But you do have to, no matter how good you are, you have to develop it.
Yeah, well,
don't you agree?
I do agree. And I think my mother was a medium, and my aunt and grandma. And I was born, I think, with mediumistic tendencies. I mean, as a kid, at the age of 3, that's when my first experiences really came into play. But I know that you don't have to use your mediumistic skills to give messages to people. It took me down a different road. The creative side of my life started to manifest as music. And then later on, I was meant to be this medium because things happened in my life that forced me onto a different path. But you do need to have broad shoulders to be a medium. And you become more sensitive to feeling and sensitive to the environment that you live in. And there's a lot of wicked people out there, people who don't like to see you get on. And you have to ignore the criticisms that some people do out of malice and jealousy, because the mediumistic profession seems to breed a lot of jealousy, as though it's a huge competition. So you have to ignore all that. Needless to say, I don't ignore it, because I go right to the point and speak my mind. But just going off the subject, there was a man, a guy called Jinaraja Daza. He was a theosophist and a bit of a radical. And he wrote a book called The Principles of Theosophy. And it's all about the mechanics of the brain and how the brain evolved, the bony box, the prehistoric brain at the back of the skull. And he said, very few people know this or realize it, But very few people, particularly those who are not mediumistically inclined, can actually see any indigo in a rainbow. It's only the mediumistic inclined people and children up to a certain age can identify the whole spectrum, particularly indigo, whose vibrations do not respond to certain people's brains, which I find quite fascinating. My wife, however, thinks it's ridiculous because she can see indigo in a rainbow, but that means she's obviously mediumistically inclined. I just thought to throw that in so people can.
Interesting. And I do want to say I don't see indigo. I've never seen it.
It's very difficult to see if you look at a rainbow, Kalila, because they're not very distinct, the colors, and you probably do see it. It's just that one color seems to wash into the next one.
Yeah, I don't really study. I mean, I don't really stare at them. I mean, it's just kind of like, yeah, there's one there, and
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest. I don't always see it. Sometimes I can't see any of them except, say, red and blue. But it's an interesting point that he made. Needless to say, his book was banished by the Theosophy Society. I've got a very old copy. I think it was published in the late 1800s. But he was a fascinating man, and some of the concepts he puts out there, it was all transcripts from a lecture that he did in London. And a lot of the theosophical beliefs, they're all Eastern-based, which appeals to me, like Annie Besant and Madame Blavatsky and all those people. But some of these books are very helpful. C.W. Leadbeater, who was a friend of Ivan Tutinsky, the guy who did a lot of research into the workings of the brains of people with unusual skills. And I think I've said many times that he found that people who are mediumistically inclined, the pineal gland was larger in children than it is in an adult, and more developed in a female than it was in a male, because females tend to be more sensitive. And everybody knows that children are very psyched to a certain age. Men have to work hard at it. And there's a high percentage of male mediums who are gay. It doesn't make you gay. It's the female energy. It's to do with the hormonal system. You develop your mediumistic skills. A lot of changes do occur. A lot of highs and lows, emotionally speaking. And people have come to me and said, well, why do I feel miserable? I feel sad all the time. Well, sometimes it can affect you that way. And then the next time I see them, they're as high as the clouds. And they're different, like the hormones play games with them. But this occurs more in men than it does in women because of the way the psyche works. You can tell a change in a person by their gait, because a lot of people don't realize it. We all know what chakras are, but every chakra affects the gait, the way you walk. For one example, people who live in Muladhara, this is the base chakra, the one at the base of the spine, when they're walking, they don't move their arms or move their arms very, very little. So if you make a study of it, you can see the way chakras will affect a person's demeanor, the way they are as an individual, because chakras play an important part in the manifestation of our mediumistic skills.
Stay tuned for more Afterlife Radio.
Follow me, Kalila Smith, into the mysterious world of spirits. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, is a concise how-to manual for anyone who enjoys a good ghost hunt. Learn the history of spiritualism, learn what a ghost is and what is not, learn the truth about poltergeists. We'll also delve into the realm of spiritual beings that never were human.
You're listening to Afterlife Radio.
A lot of people study only one type of mediumship or only one spiritual path of mediumship. What is the name of that last book you mentioned? Because I can also post these in the group if people don't remember them.
Principles of Theosophy. THEO Sophy. And it's by Jinarajadaza. Daza. His name is spelled Jinarajadasa. Jinarajadaza. He was a very diminutive man with a scientific background and very knowledgeable on Eastern traditions. But of course, he was a radical. And in those days, radicals were not really accepted, particularly when they amassed a following. And he got a big following behind him.
Very, very interesting. I think this is all very interesting information, and it's helpful to people. Again, if you're a medium, if you're not a medium, all of these things can help you, because even if you're not a medium, sometimes your loved ones will come directly to you, and oftentimes they do. Sometimes they do want to come through a medium, but I have had instances. One of the funniest things that I experienced, I was doing a gallery up in Memphis. And I had, a small size group, maybe about 30 people in the room. And I was doing this gallery, and I realized that most of the time, not everyone is going to get a message. But I did see this one woman, and I could see she so desperately wanted to hear from someone. And I could just see the disappointment on her face, and I kept feeling her sadness and her desperation. And at the very end, I said, I can tell that you're disappointed that you didn't hear from who you wanted to hear from. I said, who were you hoping to hear from? And she said, my son. And I was like, oh, gosh. And it happened to be one of the times that we did an experiment in Memphis where the Paranormal Society up there was putting up electronic equipment to just kind of test me while I was doing the reading. They wanted to see what kind of reading they were going to get on their meters. And they had put some equipment up behind me that I could not see. And when I started asking her questions, and I said, well, I can't promise you that it'll come through. I said, but maybe if I, try to just stay quiet for a moment, maybe I can, kind of pick up on him. And when I did that, everybody in the room started laughing. And I thought, how horrible. Why are these people laughing? This is terrible. And somebody said, turn around, and all the lights were blinking on the meters.
Oh, wow.
And it finally occurred to me, and I asked the lady, I said, what did your son do when he was alive? And she said, oh, he was a medium. And I said, I said, okay, let me explain to you that he doesn't want to talk through me. I said, you have to work on opening yourself up to hear him directly. I said, he's not going to come through me, especially now. So he's making things light up, and everybody's killing themselves laughing. And I'm like, this guy's not coming through me. He doesn't care. So, but it took all that for her to even tell me that he was a medium. And it's like, well, sometimes there are loved ones that have something to say to you, and they don't feel comfortable coming through a third party. There's a lot of different factors involved. So, even if you're not a medium, sometimes you will get direct communication. And again, you have to be open to the signs and symbols that, you might experience, that your loved one's trying to reach out for you. And there's a number of things that they can do. They can come through your dreams. You might smell a certain smell that was associated with them, if they wore a particular type of cologne, or, back in the day when a lot of people smoked cigars, you might smell the cigar smoke. Lots of times you'll just feel their presence. Sometimes you'll actually feel them touch you. I used to feel my daughter touch my cheek. She would tickle my cheek, or she would play with my hair at night when I was trying to go to sleep. I would feel someone playing with my hair. There's a variety of signs and symbols. One of the things that became a game for Stephanie was butterflies. Every time I turned around, I would see a butterfly, and I would know that it was from her. And I could be driving 70 miles an hour down the interstate, and a butterfly would be traveling with my car, going the same time I was. Or I'd have a butterfly tap my windshield while I was sitting at a red light. Just these very strange instances where a butterfly would come up out of nowhere, and I would just know that it was her. And these are the kind of things that you really need to look for and be open to. So never ever close your mind to what might happen, and you don't necessarily have to be a medium to experience these things. One of the most profound things I think happened for me anyway, on the anniversary, the first anniversary of her death, I was really taking it hard, and I was at work. I was preparing to do go collect for the tours in the French Quarter. And I was sitting there counting money in my car. I was counting, banks to make change for people. And I was looking down, and I was becoming to the point where I couldn't hardly breathe. I was starting to hyperventilate. And I said in the car, I was the only one in the car, and I said out loud, God, how do I know I'm ever going to see her again? Because that was my biggest fear. And I think that's everybody's biggest fear, is that you will never, ever, ever see your loved one again.
Yeah.
And it was the strangest thing. I said it out loud. And just then a car passed me very slow and stopped a few feet ahead at the stop sign. And when I glanced up, the license plate said, "Believe." And the car, I just sat there with my mouth hanging open, and the car took off faster than I could grab my camera and take a picture of it. But, in that instance, it was like, I know what I saw, and I didn't imagine it. And I instantly knew that she was okay.
Yeah, that's a classic example. That's beautiful. When that happens, it's lovely.
Yes, it really is. And it happens to people all the time. So you have to really just, that was my big motto in my mediumship, is you have to believe. If you really, you get to a point where but in the beginning, when you're struggling with it, if you just open your mind and believe, and trust, you'll start getting a lot of signs from them yourself. And it's always great to get that validation from a medium and get an in-depth message.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. But just thought I'd throw that out there for those who are not mediums.
Yeah.
Well, Billy, we're running out of time here. This has been wonderful. It's the fastest hour. Things go by so fast, so we'll have to touch on some more subjects of this next time.
Yes.
Maybe talk a little more about dreams and premonitions, perhaps, because I was hoping to get into that. But so for now, we're going to thank everybody for coming out and say good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.